Here. Okay, welcome to another edition of Kennedy Space Center's Engineering University. Today we have a special guest, Dr. Michael Bell, and we are going to talk about lessons learned in NASA and at KSC. So Dr. Bell, if you will give us a brief introduction, please.
Absolutely. My job, actually I have three different job titles. One of them is as the Agency Lessons Learned Program Manager, which is funded by the Chief Engineer, Ralph Rowe's office at NASA headquarters. Previously, this function was done at headquarters, but they have delegated the function down to KSC. Also, I am the Kennedy Space Center Knowledge Manager. So there is a knowledge manager at each one of the centers. And their job is to promote knowledge sharing across that center and interface with the agency chief knowledge officer, who also works for Ralph Rowe. And the third function that I do is an engineering function here in E. We have something called the Kennedy Engineering Academy, which is primarily technical talks, kind of like TED Talks, different projects and programs will get to key milestones and want to share their knowledge. And a forum used to do that at the top of the OSB2 building, or also the mission briefing room. But we have these discussions of technical topics. It's a good way for people to sit in a room and ask questions, share their knowledge, and even before and after the session, do some networking. So those sort of functions work together across engineering and across the center for knowledge sharing and networking. And also helps with, kind of infusing some innovation across projects.
So Michael, describe for us what the Lessons Learned program is, what its benefits are, what the purpose of it is.
Okay, the Lessons Learned program actually predates the agency's knowledge sharing initiative. And it started out as just a simple database, an online system. Back when we first discovered the internet, we said, hey, what if we could share knowledge or documents across the center? So there's a formal, I think there's 7 fields that you fill out when you're creating a lessons learned document. And you upload those into the lessons learned system. And some adult has to be in charge to make sure that we don't just put whatever we want out there. So we make sure that the information in these lessons learned documents is accurate and it's understandable and readable. There's a person at each one of the centers whose job it is to get these approved. We go through export control and ITAR. And then, of course, if you're working in a specific branch on a specific center, you might put in some jargon or some terminology that might not be understandable to people across the center or even across the rest of the agency. So we have a whole committee at KSC, and it's a best practice for each center to have their own lessons committee. For one thing, to keep their eye out for lessons learned and projects and happenings on the center, but also to review those lessons and validate and verify those. So I chair the center's lessons learned committee, and we review those lessons that come in. We also then, as the headquarters point of contact, I send them to myself to approve and publish into the agency lessons learned system.
So what is there a criteria for an employee to submit a lessons learned, or are there any qualifications for a lessons learned?
Yes, I'll start by saying I'm funded by the Ralph Rowe, by the chief engineer, because the realization is that part of our project management process requires us to share knowledge at the end of a project. So there is an agency NASA policy document, and the primary document that says at the end of a project, through the decommissioning phase, we must figure out, well, what do we learn? What works? What can we take forward? So it's part of the process improvement methodology and thinking. And I'm kind of going all over, but working in Ralph's organization is also the APPLE program, which is the Academy of Project Engineering Leadership, where they have formal classes where you sit down and you're going to learn how to be a system engineer or how to earn value management. That's one way that we learn. But the lessons learned system is focusing on those experiences that you have in a project or just at any point in your career, where we want to write down what we learned, what happened, and then how we could improve future activities and share those with other people who may come after us. So it's kind of a pay-it-forward system where you put in a formal lessons learned document. But the idea of knowledge management is that people learn in lots of different ways. So we have the Kennedy Engineering Academy, where we're having these presentations. That's one way to share your experiences in addition to writing it down in a document. The Apple folks, the Academy of Program and Project Engineering Leadership, they actually have podcasts. I used to drive a long way to work, an hour to work, an hour home. So I was listening to these podcasts in my car on the way home just to find out more about what's going on across the agency. That's a great way to share knowledge. Also, case study discussions. If you start out a project, if I was a project manager, I might want to figure out, well, what happened on previous projects that are similar to this project and get my team together and discuss those. So the case study discussion process is a good way, because my project is not going to be exactly like the previous projects. So we have to use our own gray matter to compare, well, how
Michael, it looks like we broke up.
Yes, so as a lessons learned facilitator, I've actually helped people walk through the process of what's working, what's not working, and scrubbing all those ideas until we can come up with something which we think is worth sharing. I mean, everything that we talk about in these lessons learned discussions might not be a lessons learned entry, but I think for 10 people on a team, and one person shares an idea that they learned, which the other folks on the team may have already understood that as pretty basic thoughts. So it's helpful for the team to go through that process. Like distilling team, where they distilled the knowledge down to what they would actually share in the lessons learned system.
So, Michael, you broke up a couple of times there, but I think we got the gist of what you were saying. You mentioned that at the end of every project, we should be submitting lessons learned. Does it matter what size or what type the project is?
No, as a matter of fact, one of the difficult things about being the lessons learned program manager for the entire agency is all the centers are different, all the projects are different. So we want to be prescriptive and provide you with information on how to do things. I mean, NASA engineers give me a form, what exactly do I need to do? But you really, as the project manager of a large project, if you're running the Cassini project, which is 12 years collecting data across Saturn, or if you're doing one of these CubeSat projects, you've got different challenges and a different knowledge capture strategy goes into those. You may, if you're running a large project, have a dedicated person who is your focusing on lessons learned, whereas a smaller project, people wear multiple hats and maybe doing the knowledge sharing lessons learned after the fact. Now, every time you finish the project, you should talk about lessons learned, but you may not specifically have something that you want to put in the lessons learned system after that project is over. So that's another challenge, is prescribing that you must do lessons learned, but sometimes there's nothing that you're going to share with the agency or with the center for that matter.
Okay, so there are at least two ways of sharing lessons learned that I think you've mentioned. One is through the lessons learned database, and is the other one the Kennedy Engineering Academy?
Yes, doing these briefings is important. At the end of the briefing, you can actually put the lessons in the system, but people like to learn real time. They like to be in person, or at least virtually like this, where you can ask questions. When you're in one of these lessons learned sessions with other people, somebody may ask a question that you didn't think of, but it really helps you. So having those live knowledge sharing sessions is a complement to reading the lesson itself. Now it's great that I can log on, in my pajamas at 11 o'clock at night and search a lessons learned database, but interacting with a real person is of great value. Now, every time you go to the lessons learned system, you find the point of contact. So I could call that person, I could email them, I could ask them questions. For some reason, engineers seem to be reluctant to contact the person, but actually the lessons learned system is kind of an expertise locator system as well, because you could search up a lesson, find somebody who's worked on your entry or avionics problem at Marshall or Langley or out in California, and call them up and have a conversation. So it's another way of capturing that information and sharing the knowledge, is putting in those lessons learned with the points of contact.
So to get into the lessons learned database, I can go to the website and fill out a form and put in my lessons learned. What about the Kennedy Engineering Academy? What is the process for providing a lesson through that venue?
The Kennedy Engineering Academy website is k.ks.nasa, and there is one button which you would suggest, I want to present something, I have knowledge to share. Now, part of my job title as a lessons learned program manager and the Kennedy Engineering Academy dean is also chief nagging officer. So I nag people. I contact them, I ask them, I email them, I ask their boss. I suggest, here is a topic that we just finished. I just saw this in the NE Weekly Notes. Hey, maybe we could benefit from a live discussion of some of these, of this particular activity. So if somebody actually gets the Employee of the Quarter award, they're probably going to email from me because, all those wonderful things that they did to get that award, I'm going to say, hey, this is really cool. Do people really know about this activity? Let's discuss this further in a live forum. Yes, another way is through the Kennedy Engineering Academy. You can request to be a presenter. More than likely, I'm going to request that you give me, your time to make a presentation. And the nice thing that we've done lately is started we record all the presentations. We've been doing that for a while, but we put these in NASATube now, and NASATube has full text search capability. So I can go to NASATube and type in shuttle or entry, descent, landing, or propulsion, and find a video and go to the exact point in the hour-long presentation where that person was discussing that activity. So that is, one of the things that we're trying to do is use the technology to improve the delivery of knowledge to people. You don't have to go and sit through an hour or 2-hour briefing. If it's uploaded on NASATube, you can search it and find the specific nugget that you're looking for.
So that's a good segue to my next question, Michael. What is working well and what is not working as well as you would like? And what are some things that we can do to change, or what are some things that you'd like to change?
Well, I guess I'll start with the bad news. What's not working well? Everybody seems to be very busy and trying to find the right level of lessons to go in the system. Lessons learned is not everybody's number one priority. I mean, the number one priority is to meet your milestones and complete your project. Now, at the beginning of your project, you should search the lessons learned database to find out, well, what are some of the risks, the mishaps or problems that happened before that you can avoid. So you should be using the lessons learned system, but it's still not something that everybody is going to be using all the time. So I have to remind people. I have to put items in the daily news. I, talk to people, give briefings at staff meetings to remind people that we're sharing knowledge is important. Here's where you can find knowledge. Here's some of the new things that we're coming up with. Goldfire is a new search engine that JSC has funded, which not only searches the lessons learned system, but actually sorts the data and presents it in knowledgeable chunks. So we're always improving the technology that we have, electronic technology that we have for these systems. But I don't want to overkill and expect everybody to do this all day long. I mean, my job is knowledge management all day long, and I can talk about lessons learned every day. But most people are not going to do that. So what is the right cadence? What is the right amount of input and emphasis on lessons learned. What's going well? All the different methods that we have for sharing knowledge, the websites that we have out there. We're improving the search engines with natural language processing. If you type in a query, previously you just get a long list of websites, but we can actually type in, how do I improve my dissent process? And the Goldfish actually understands that. So we're improving the search technology, the search capability, the plethora of ways to learn, such as the podcasts and the videos. The YouTube generation only wants to watch a video for 3 or 4 minutes. Nobody wants to go to an hour-long or 3-hour class. Well, some people don't. So sorting those down to the smaller nuggets that we're able to develop. And I also work with the headquarters technical writer. So if you are not proficient or don't have a great love for writing up your lessons learned, there's help out there. We can help you craft that lesson, and there's a whole science of storytelling, of how you tell the story so that people will understand it and you get to what's important.
So so if the lessons are not there, then if someone searches the database, they're not going to get the benefit of those lessons that were learned. So what can the management team do to help facilitate that process of inputting those lessons learned? Do you have any suggestions?
I think just encouraging people to use a lessons learned system. Thoughts that we had was to look at the lessons learned system and maybe kick off a staff meeting once a month with, here is a nugget related to one of the projects that we found in the lessons learned system. If you go to the lessons learned system on the NASA Engineering Network, which is nen.nasa.gov, there is a random lesson that shows up every time you refresh to the web page. And so this is something that you probably haven't seen, something that you know. What if you actually discuss that once a month or once a week, which kind of sets down the habit. They say excellence is a habit. You have to keep doing it again and again. So if supervisors and managers would just get in the habit of looking for these lessons learned. One thing I didn't mention was part of the NASA Engineering Network are these communities of practice. So there are people who are focused on structures or on simulation all across the agency that are in these groups that are sharing knowledge, and they have a site, a space on the NASA Engineering Network. So if supervisors would kind of remind people or just discuss what's going on in these, I think that would help to make it part of our daily life.
So I just had a thought while you were talking there, Michael. You know how we have made safety a part of our culture. We start meetings with a safety nugget, if you will. Perhaps one of the things that we can consider doing is perhaps finding a way to incorporate lessons learned in that culture in a way that's similar to the way that we have addressed safety. But it would have to be, it'd have to be brief, sort of like it would have to be interesting, relevant to the audience. For example, if we're going to talk about a lessons learned that happened in NASA, but that's not related to us at KSC, we may lose the audience. But if we make it relevant to us, that may be a way to get it incorporated into our culture the way that we have done with safety. Yes.
That's a good point. One of the things that my group has been doing over the pandemic is we've been doing some book discussions. And we've been reading the book Moonshot, which is about what happened at NASA back in the 60s. But rather than just talk randomly about the book, each week when we look at one chapter, we will ask ourselves, well, what are some of the human factors implications of this chapter? So it's really relevant for us to look at, these books and say, how was reliability addressed back during the Apollo era? And so as we go through, it's very relevant to us at NASA within my branch. And it makes it more interesting than just reading this book, which, although I thought the book was interesting. You can search the lessons learned system for a specific topics. If you're a systems engineer or you're doing non-destructive tests, you can find lessons that are related to that area, and discussing those as a safety topic or a lessons learned tip at the beginning of the meeting, I think would start people down that path of realizing there is value from the lessons learned system.
Right. Okay. So let me sort of recap what I think I've learned today, Michael. The ways that we can capture lessons learned are through the NASA Lessons Learned database.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a KSC Lessons Learned database as well? Or is it part of the NASA system?
I encourage our lessons to go into the KSC, to the NASA system. Now, one of the things that you did ask me, what's not working so well at some of the other centers, they are creating their own lessons learned systems because of the fear, the reluctance that, this is not ready for prime time. I'm at Glenn, and I don't think people outside of Glenn should know this, which is counter to the idea of sharing across the agency. So they're creating their own systems. And I have purposely said, not at KSC. Now, if you're a specific program, such as the Launch Services Project or program, there may be things that are competition sensitive or have information about prices that you don't want to share across the agency, across anybody at NASA, as a matter of fact. So that makes sense. There are some things that do not go in. But there is a tendency with SharePoint and all these other tools was for people to create a lessons learned system for any B25 branch. Well, if you're not in that branch, you're not going to be able to benefit from that knowledge. So I would encourage people, you can use keywords and tags to put stuff into the agency system. And if somebody's searching the system and finds something that's not of use to them, they just roll to the next lesson. So we have the computing power to put everything in one place. And there's also structures that you can set up in schemes to have databases talk to each other. But I'd rather put it together, make it discoverable versus trying to put it in a little silo. And then when the end of, say, the shuttle program ends, does that database go away? If it's a shuttle funded database, there is a struggle to figure out what to do. But if it's in the NASA Lessons Learned Information System, as this launch happens, as this project is completed, as this program is retired, it's maintained as an institutional capability. Right. And there is a person who is funded, to maintain this and keep it going without having to worry about the latest update with your IT security plan, all the other software upgrades that come with maintaining your own system. You're relieved of that responsibility if it's put in the agency system.
Okay. Another way to capture lessons learned is through the Kennedy Engineering Academy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And there's a request that the management team encourages their employees to utilize the lessons learned database and Kennedy Engineering Academy for all of the benefits that it provides. And then we have to find a creative way. This is me. I'm thinking it would be good if we a creative way to incorporate utilizing lessons learned into our culture in a similar way that we have with safety.
I think that's a great idea, the safety tip, the lessons learned tip, to utilize that. It's something that people at NASA are already used to.
Yes.
And follow along in that same vein.
And we just keep reinforcing that message. We just kind of, just like I said, make it become a part of our everyday culture, our everyday language.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and another thing I'll mention, some people may be reluctant to share a mistake that they've made. They may feel it's career limiting, they're embarrassed. But there's a way to structure your lesson or share your knowledge so that it's generic and it's universal, and it's better that we learn from it and other people learn from it. So it's not often, I haven't seen many people fired at NASA because they shared the lessons learned, but that may be a thought. You may think, I don't want to share my lesson because it's going to embarrass me. We have a whole list of lessons called My Best Mistake.
If the stuff that we do were easy, then you wouldn't need us doing it. I mean, if we're not pushing the envelope, if we're not making mistakes, then we're not doing enough. We're not going far enough. That's what we do.
Yeah. If we didn't make any mistakes, then you're right. Would we really be doing something innovative and amazing?
Exactly. Okay, Michael, I think we've covered everything that I wanted to cover. I've certainly learned a lot talking to you today, and I thought I knew about lessons learned. I've learned some things today. Any closing thoughts?
I would say, Tommy, I've enjoyed talking to you. I am willing to help anybody, come to staff meetings and discuss the lessons learned process. Facilitate with a project manager if they want to walk through, what's worked on their team and help them craft it. I have resources at NASA headquarters to actually write up lessons and do some technical writing and editing. So I'm from the government. I'm here to help. And I've enjoyed talking to you about this topic.
Well, Michael, I really appreciate your time today, and look forward to talking to you again. And let's make this happen.
All right, let's do it.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your time, Michael.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.